We went into early retirement 3 years ago, and we can still remember all of the worry we had about if we were doing the right thing or not. And then we did something even crazier. We bought a cabin on a cruise ship, the Villa Vie Odyssey. Now, we get a lot of questions about the joys of this kind of lifestyle, which there are many, but there can also be a lot of regrets for anyone who chooses to do something like this.
Yeah, we've done the research, and when we looked at it, we discovered that there are some common kind of regrets that people have when they retire early. So today, we're not just going to talk about Villa Vie. We will talk about Villa Vie some, but we're going to talk about the list of regrets that early retirees report and experience, and this is backed up by research. So today we're going to go through the list. We're going to talk about our experience with them. Some of them we've had, others we haven't, and kind of give you an in-depth discussion into the regrets of early retirement.
Let's talk about the first regret that we often see from those of us who are taking early retirement, and that's underestimating expenses. Now, we started out with a budget, a very common sense budget, but we were kind of blindsided by the reality of that. It didn't quite jive. What did we experience?
Yeah, we had a budget and we really paid a lot of attention to it. And so we were very realistic, put a little extra in there, and then we added inflation to it. We're a few years into this now. But essentially, on top of that, we had some wiggle room. So I tried to say budget plus inflation plus wiggle room equals our budget, our real budget, right? So we weren't going to have as many surprises. But then came things like healthcare. Because we retired early, we pay for our own health care, and in the United States, that is not cheap. So we actually had a health care, which is a big part of our budget in terms of the overall percentage, go up year over year, double digits. So we had planned for 3 to 4%, 5% inflation. It went up double digits on a big number. So that kind of crushed us.
Yeah, and then also inflation hit our travel budget as well. Share with folks like what we experienced there.
Yeah, we did Airbnbs. We did, of course, travel on airplanes and all of that kind of stuff. And what we found was it was kind of the same thing again. Airbnbs really started going up. And sometimes that was a surprise because like Mexico City introduced a 20 or 25%, I think it's 20% tax on top of all Airbnbs that didn't exist when we did our budget.
Yeah, there was no way we could have planned for that. It was completely unexpected, but it happened.
It happened. And so you're talking about a month of Airbnb, which is not cheap in Mexico City, and then you add 20% to that. That's an example. Also, airlines were going up. The famous pizza in London, we went out just to eat and spent a lot of money, not because it was special or it was something that we wanted to do. We just wanted to eat. And a pizza later, it's $110. That was definitely not something we were planning to do.
Yeah. What tips would we have for folks who are planning early retirement but are really worried about underestimating their expenses? What can they do to kind of keep that under control?
I like our plan. I mean, we have very predictable, for the most part, our house is paid for. So we have a co-op fee and we have insurance and healthcare and that kind of stuff. But we know what those numbers are. So write everything down. Don't forget streaming and that kind of stuff because it really adds up.
And it keeps going up.
And that is really one of the ones that grabbed us. So I would put a bigger multiplier if you are being realistic on things like streaming, on things like healthcare in the United States. And especially if they're big numbers, kind of plan a little outside the margins on that, get a budget, and then add 3 to 4, 5% for inflation. And then add, I think, about another 10% for fluff, or not fluff, really a fudge factor, a way to say we've got some flex. So if your budget was $100, right, say that you need to get 110 in your real budget, you may or may not spend that extra 10%. You may keep it in cash, but then you have it. If you need it, you don't want to be surprised and start running out of money. So that's a thing to do.
And what, if anything, how does Villa Vie play into this at all? Does the all-inclusive nature of it help at all, really?
Yeah, it helps. Doesn't help healthcare. Doesn't help insurance, doesn't help things back at home, but it does help us on our travel. We're we are pretty able to predict a lot of our expenses. And of course, the contract says that we're tied to that. Now, we are still experiencing some things like hotels and airfare and that kind of stuff when we leave the ship. But sure, the Villa Vie package kind of helps us plan accordingly, and it's helping us. So I do feel less stressed than I used to about travel.
Let's talk about the next regret that often affects early retirees, and that's health issues limiting activities. Now, many talk about the increasing healthcare cost, but it's also important to talk about health span. Share with others what we've learned through our reading about the difference between health span and lifespan.
This is a really simple concept, and we try to keep it front and center. It basically says lifespan is how long you are in this life before you leave it. Health span says what subset of this lifespan are you actually healthy and able to do the things that you want to do, which of course changes some over time. I can't do what I did as my 25-year-old self, but the goal is to keep health span as big a part of the lifespan as possible so you can enjoy your life.
Yeah, we should mention that we've learned this concept initially from a fantastic book called Outlive by Peter Attia, which was just fantastic, and we learned so much from that.
Yeah, we love it. So you focus on health span, and basically that means doing the right things, getting checkups, taking care of yourself, not just taking a pill for everything, but trying to prevent the thing you need to take the pill for. But the other thing that we've seen, especially on this ship, is the difference in habit and lifestyle makes on health. A lot of these people with regrets, that they can't do what they want to do in retirement. Oftentimes it comes from, bad habits or eating, drinking, smoking, not exercising, those kind of things.
Yeah, and we're seeing some amazing things here, and we're going to these great ports, but for some, it's very difficult to go out and actually enjoy those ports.
Yeah, it's difficult for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it has nothing to do with their choice. It was just a condition they're dealing with. But others, like, for example, there is a 74-year-old woman that we are with in the gym that is crushing it every day. And then we are also on the ship with people much younger than her that struggle to walk up the stairs. And I don't think that's all out of their control. I know in her case, she's working it hard. And in others' cases, I see indulging, not exercising, that kind of thing. So
that 74-year-old is such an inspiration to us.
Crushes it.
Incredible.
Crushes it. So I think really what we've learned and what we really try to focus on, that's not something you want to get to the place where you're regretting it and then regret it. It's a daily walk. You got to make decisions every day for exercise.
Small changes can make a huge
difference. Small changes and discipline. Get up and do your exercise. Do what you can do, because that over time, of course, is what allows that 74-year-old to do that. I'm hoping that I can do that when I emerge.
Same here.
Really important.
Let's talk about a surprising regret we've seen, and that's increased togetherness. Now, when you retire early, you're going to find that you're going to be spending a lot more time with your partner. So you have to be able to navigate the dynamics of that new situation. And that's not always easy. And it's especially difficult on a ship like this because you're in close quarters and you're going to be spending a lot of time together. Now, we've been able to manage that pretty well. So share with folks how we've been able to do that.
Well, first of all, we like being together. So we're very thankful for that. But we also are very different people. So we don't spend all our time together. If we did, we may not like being together as much. So we have different schedules. For example, he gets up and does his morning routine and workout and that kind of thing long before I do. I get up and have a separate routine, and then we meet at lunch. So we have about half a day separate, right? And I think being deliberate about that, it's not just our preference, it's just kind of who we are. And at the same time, it helps us have our separate time. The other thing is we can spend time in this room doing very separate things. And, you doing one thing, me doing the next. So I think
it's important in that situation to be able to communicate with each other when you're in that same space.
Yeah.
Like whenever you're playing your music, which you like to do, I might say, would you mind putting your headphones on or something? And
Well, do you always say it that nicely? No,
nice.
but yeah, you're exactly right. How do you share the space? How do you communicate? You're going to have to be deliberate.
Compromise is important.
Yeah. And I don't think it's anything we don't overly think about it. We just kind of do it. You figure it out.
Yeah.
But we have seen, friends, not necessarily on the ship, but I have friends, that have really struggled with this.
Yeah.
And these are people that love each other, that are very committed to each other, but just had very different lives. And all that time together was something they hadn't had, or they hadn't had in 40 years.
Right. And they established their own unique routines. And those routines, when they come together, sometimes they clash.
They do. And so that affects things. And so, I think the being aware of this is probably the number one thing to do. But then thinking about it, obviously talking about it, and then just acting on it, things like separate schedules and coming together and coming apart is really important, because you want to enjoy the time you have together. It's nice to catch up like we do at dinner.
Yeah, dinner is very important to us. A lot of times other folks make a point of spending it with other folks on the ship with big tables. We do that sometimes too, but we also think it's very important that we just spend time together and reinforce the bonds that we have.
Yeah, we prioritize it. So we enjoy it about at least half the time or more, maybe, for us.
Yeah, and that's a conscious
we're together. That's just who we are. So, but I think, the understanding that this is definitely a common thing that happens to folks. You got all this time on your hands. You actually are not distracted with the other things. So you've got this other person, you've got all this time, you've got to figure that out. So it goes the right way, not the wrong way.
Yeah. Another regret that is actually pretty common is extreme boredom and lack of purpose. We were actually talking to a couple recently who were saying that they had recently retired and they were feeling a little bit bored, that there wasn't enough to do that they were finding. How do we prevent that from happening for us?
Well, first of all, I will say this. I think when you first retire, which I think was in their case, it's going to feel very disorienting and weird. So there's just a phase of just kind of ride the wave. That's what I think. Before you start judging it and making decisions on if retirement's right for you, in the first 3 months.
Yeah, don't overreact. There's going to be a period of adjustment of probably several months. Don't do anything rash at that point.
Don't make any decisions. Just don't judge it, that kind of thing. But I think, clearly in our case, we stay busy. Sometimes I worry that we're too busy. But if you think about it, of course, we're living on a ship. So we've always got, whatever's out that window to go explore. And that's our passion. So we kind of took something that we used to do, 3 or 4 weeks a year and have turned it into almost every day. And we love that. But the other thing is, like we were talking about a while ago, our routines with our exercise, with our hobbies, with YouTube. Right? I mean, YouTube's a big hobby of yours.
It actually takes a lot of time.
It really does. So those are things, they're clearly different from what was before, but we're not bored. I think when it comes to purpose, you got to step back and think about that one, depending on, don't do it in the first 2 months because I think that's harsh. But, I always felt like in my job, I did have a purpose for the employees that worked with me, the communities we served, that kind of stuff. And it meant a lot to me. And I think you have to kind of, think about when that's gone, what else are you going to do in your life to give you that? Because you may not be bored, but you could still be missing, who am I doing this for? Is this all selfish? And I think having purpose, figuring out what that is, and it doesn't have to be a full-time job, but how do you give back? What's important to you? How do you go do the things that you dreamed about before is really important. And, so far, we're 3.5 years in. I've had neither one of those problems, but we do have several people that even after the initial phase have gone back to work, some of them.
Yeah, we have seen that. Now, on the ship, there are a few folks who have said that maybe they're a little bit bored, but for the most part, we don't see that a lot. And I think that has something to do with the built-in community here. Yeah. Because you always seem to have a playmate that we've seen.
Absolutely.
We see people doing a lot of different activities. Tell folks about that.
It's great, too. I mean, especially, we have a lot of solo residents in the community, and they have absolutely bonded and have this phenomenal community, and of course it's just a part of the overall community. But they have, you know, all kind of events the community does, offshore, onshore, puzzles, games, karaoke, dance, you know, all these things that, you know, these people are doing. And regardless if they're solo or are traveling with someone or whatever it might be, these people didn't know each other a few months ago. And now it's really part of this tapestry of community, which is wonderful. And I think that's really a big part of the draw for Villa Vie. I do.
Yeah. Another regret is the loss of social connections. We often see that when it comes to work colleagues, a lot of people who retire early, they try to stay in touch with their work colleagues, but they are finding that their work colleagues are not particularly responsive.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have to keep in mind that they're still working. You're not, you still have you now have a lot more time on your hands. And so it can be difficult to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
How have we been able to manage that kind of issue?
I think one of the things with your work colleagues, especially, and this sounds harsh, but you're just going to have to remember you don't have nearly what you did in common anymore. In addition to not having the time, you know, because one of you's working and one of you's not, you don't have the day-to-day thing that bonded you for however long you work together. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have and enjoy a relationship. But I think you have to really step back and adjust your expectations because things do change. They also move on, and you're not there if you're the one that retired. I have a few friends from my last job that we had this discussion, and we decided that we were going to be deliberate about it. And that when we did get together, we were going to talk about something besides work because, you know, we need, I obviously wasn't there anymore, but we really do make an effort to go to lunch, to stay in touch, to text and that kind of thing. But I think it is a bad idea to expect that if you had 40 friends at work, you're going to keep 40 friends. You may, if you're lucky and work really hard at it, keep a few. So that's just something that's just the nature of what it is.
Now, this same issue is going to happen with friends and family back home as well. What have we experienced?
We miss them.
Yeah.
And life goes on and you're not there and, you know, it's your choice and they don't know what time zone you're in. And so they start wondering, am I bothering you? Or you're in the middle of something? Or, you know, we, you know, are worried that they're at work. It changes. And so I think it's the same thing. You have to really acknowledge and be deliberate about it. And I think you also have to really kind of make sure you don't get overly sensitive about the reality of it, because I don't think it's from lack of care, but I do think you see each other less.
Yeah. And I also think something you said about work colleagues where you have less in common. I think for some of the people on the ship with this particular lifestyle, we're all about travel now.
Yeah.
And we want to talk about that with our friends and family, travel all the time. But they're not having that same experience. And so there can be a disconnect there.
Yeah. And we're not having the experiences that they're having.
Right.
So that road goes both ways. So I think, here's the deal. I think you have to realize that you've made a life change, you know, both to retire or if you're doing like us. Set your expectations realistically. Don't judge them, kind of like I said a while ago, and then be deliberate. Understand that you're going to have to work probably 10 times as hard to have even fewer relationships. So focus on the ones that really mean something to you, nourish those, and it'll work out.
The next common regret is not downsizing or moving sooner. Now, we did downsize. We were in a larger multi-story home, and then we downsized to a smaller co-op. Now, we ultimately also did the ultimate in downsizing, which is moving into this cabin, which is very small. But of all of the changes that we've done, do we have any regrets about any of these decisions?
I don't. I mean, I definitely don't. We had big houses and stuff, and we brought him down to like 1,700 square feet where we are now, which is a lot less space. No garage, no all that stuff. I don't regret that at all, and it was freeing. It was hard getting rid of stuff because it was good stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. It was accumulation of years, but I don't. Coming here, I don't regret. I do like, in our case, having a home. So keeping our house in Washington.
Yeah, although we did downsize to that co-op, we still have that co-op in addition to having
we kept our home,
which may be unusual.
And that's a nice luxury to have, right? Like not everybody will do that. But so I I like having both. Not everybody does that, but a lot of folks have downsized and have said good things about it. We've known a lot of people that really struggled with it, and then once they did it, they never looked back. I know other people that wish that they had done it much sooner, and including family. And so I think you should really be honest with yourself, get your family involved. Think about it, do the numbers. Now if you've got 10 grandkids and they're in your house every Sunday, you probably don't want to do it now. Right? But I think if you have different situations, you can get used to something, or just the inertia of the change could, be something you're fighting against. It's pretty freeing, in our case, not to have lawn people and, maids and all the things that we had to have.
Don't miss that at all.
Zero.
Yes.
And all the stuff. Now, it was hard to part with it, but once we got rid of it, I never thought about it again. So I definitely think, especially if it allows you to free up time and resources to do things you want.
To do other things.
I mean, you got to look at it. And then, like I said, trusted family and friends, give it a look. But there's an emotion to it, but don't let the emotion overrule, the opportunity, because there's a lot of life, especially if we're retired early, to go live. And you want to do that, right? I think so, yeah.
Another regret in early retirement is not being able to volunteer or give back as much. Now, we know a lot of people from the Washington, D.C. area and other areas who have been very active in a lot of different causes. I myself, growing up in college and beyond, used to participate in a lot of causes, marches and protests and everything, but have slowed down quite a bit over the years and certainly into retirement.
Yeah.
Is that okay? What can we do about that?
I think it's okay. I think you have to admit it's different, So when we were working, obviously, I did a lot with United Way and other different things. And we were at home in Washington, and Meridian Park is not far from our house. And we were out there sweeping it up on Sundays. We met good friends that way, and various other causes. So the thing is, you're not there if you're doing what we're doing, or if you're pursuing an early retirement. You may not be there as much. So I think you have to get real about the fact that it looks different. Now, there's other ways to do it. Obviously, you can still contribute in different ways.
What are some ideas?
Money. You can give money. You can give your time. But the other thing is, you may have to look a little closer to where you are. So here on the ship, if it's helping somebody on the staff here, or if it's helping a fellow resident do something, or if we're off site,
Right. And the ship is trying to develop a program called Global Harmony that will kind of organize some of the people on the ship to engage in some volunteer opportunities. Yeah. It hasn't quite started yet, I don't think, but I know they're working.
I know they're on it. And so my point, I guess, is it's probably going to be a little different, or a lot different. It may feel very different from what you're used to. It's just like work friends versus being in early retirement and those changes. But you can still do it. I also think you have to give yourself grace to do what you can, and to make sure you stay engaged without over worrying about it. Do something every day that helps somebody, live as a good example, and then enjoy your retirement.
Another regret is missing the sense of identity and status for work. Now, we've been lucky enough to know some very accomplished people, and what we observed was once they retired, it was really difficult for them. They seemed to feel like they were losing their sense of self-identity and self-worth. What have we seen?
And they all made it through it. I think this is a natural part of that transition. You spend so much time focused on work, focusing your accomplishments on work, hopefully with balance with family and faith and other things that are important to you.
And defining success by
work, right? Yeah. And in Washington, that's a big deal. But I think what we have found is that people figure it out, and because it's just been so naturally front and center, that when you retire after some time to kind of decompress and detox and that kind of thing, there are things that have been there all along, or things that you'll develop that are, kind of more in front now that your career is kind of behind you. And it doesn't go away, but it just can't be all about what you were at work, because you're not that anymore.
Right. You may need to take some time to really sit with yourself and self-reflect and say, who am I? What makes me special? What defines my self-worth? And you're going to see it's not all about work. It's who you are and what you bring to the world
today. Now, right.
Not necessarily your profession before.
Yeah. And it's a healthy exercise. I did it. I mean, my work was a very huge, as you know, big part of my identity and a lot of what made me proud of who I was. And it takes a while to do that. Now, I think you can also take what made work good for you and apply it in your new retired life, right? Through volunteering, through whatever it might be. So
yeah, like for me, what was important for me was intellectual stimulation, solving problems. That's what I did so much of my career. But finding ways now to do that in my everyday through the YouTube work and graphic design and other activities and hobbies that I'm doing.
Yeah. And a lot of mine was stuff I do not miss. So I will tell you, there's a lot of stuff. I have not picked up a spreadsheet or been on Microsoft Teams and all that, and I do not miss it. So I think there's other aspects of it that you'll just, celebrate and have joy from. The bottom line is you are a different person, without the work being front and center. But you're not totally different. You just have to kind of think about where you are now, how you go forward, and how you choose to identify yourself. And I think it's really cool because it kind of puts everybody back on a different playing field. It's not this hierarchy or whatever it could be at work. And it really lets you kind of bring who you really are to the table. I think it's a great opportunity.
Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the thing that would be the biggest regret of them all, and that would be running out of money. Now, heaven forbid that ever happens to us, so what are the things that we're doing to make sure that we don't run into that situation?
Yeah, we've talked about this in other videos, so I won't get into all the details. We may want to redo that one someday. But anyway, yeah, you've got to have a financial plan. And kind of like we talked about the budget earlier, we've got a plan that takes us to 95 years of age that we built with people that know what they're doing, that manage our stuff for us. And we're pretty confident. They plan for down markets and they plan for, all of these regressions that take us different ways. But I think the real thing you have to do is make sure you're not just on a wing and a prayer and okay today, especially if you're retiring early. We are spending years of assets before we get things like Social Security and Medicare and those kind of things. So having a plan, making sure that plan is hardened and it takes you out, like I said, we're to 95 or somewhere like that based on your particular situation, and just stick to it. We look at our budget every year and every month. And I think, we make some adjustments during the year because we pull out money once a year in the beginning of the year, and then we manage to that. I think that's the other thing that I would recommend.
What's that?
Manage your annual budget through the year. Don't get halfway to June and say, I need some more money and let's pull it out, right?
Very smart.
Because the things we've talked about will happen. Yeah.
Now, one of the things we have here on the Odyssey is a contract where our monthly fees are fixed, supposedly inflation-proof, so that they don't get out of control over time. How much should we rely on that?
Well, I'm hoping that continues, but the Odyssey is a startup. Life is uncertain, so I'm counting on them doing their best to fulfill that, and I want that, and I'm hopefully we're going to enjoy all of that, and it's helping us now, for sure. But I don't ever put my financial future in the hands of somebody else.
Anyone else?
No, you can't. And so you have to have the ability to manage what comes toward you without it turning into a disaster. Now it does help. We have much less variability. We have more predictability in what we're spending money on. And I think that's a good thing. And I'm enjoying it for now.
So what regrets have we missed? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening today, and we'll see you very soon.